What is up, guys? J'espère que vous allez bien, que vous êtes en pleine forme. Bienvenue sur le podcast Conversation Awesome avec Karmakin. A place where we speak Franglish, say the word awesome a lot, mais surtout un endroit d'inspiration et d'éducation pour vous aider à optimiser votre santé globale from the inside out. Mon nom est Claudia, fondatrice de Karmakin, et ma mission avec ce podcast est de t'amener dans un monde de développement personnel, d'optimisation d'habitudes de vie et de découverte so you can unleash your potential and live the life you truly want and deserve. Merci d'être à l'écoute. You're awesome. What is up, guys? Re-bienvenue sur le podcast et bienvenue dans cette nouvelle conversation awesome. Aujourd'hui, je suis super reconnaissante de vous présenter une invitée très, très inspirante. Notre dernière invitée, d'ailleurs, de 2021, puisque les 2 prochains épisodes pour clôturer l'année vont être des épisodes solo. Donc, je vous présente aujourd'hui Jasmine. Jasmine qui est quelqu'un que je connais pas tant que ça. Je l'ai vue une fois en personne au mois de juin à travers l'entremise de mon Soul Tribe. Et on se suit évidemment mutuellement sur les réseaux sociaux et tout ça. Et dès que je l'ai rencontrée, j'ai tout de suite été inspirée par les vibes qu'elle projette, l'authenticité aussi qu'elle représente et l'espèce de wholeness assumée en tant que femme. Quelque chose que j'admire vraiment beaucoup. Donc aujourd'hui, elle vient nous parler de son histoire à travers, les études en sciences, sa carrière en tant que personal trainer, ses compétitions de bodybuilding, son désir de toujours vouloir aider les gens, mais toujours en étant un petit peu misaligned, ce qui l'a amené à ce qu'elle fait aujourd'hui, qui est vraiment d'aider les gens à guérir, d'accompagner les gens sur leur processus de guérison, de développement spirituel et personnel. Et comme vous allez voir, tout ça est fait dans une franchise vraiment, vraiment rafraîchissante. Donc, je vous en dis pas plus. Je vous laisse écouter notre conversation awesome d'aujourd'hui. Prenez des notes, soyez ouvertes d'esprit. Et moi, quand j'ai fini la conversation, quand on a fait l'enregistrement avec Jasmine, j'ai littéralement pris mon journal et j'ai commencé à journal parce que il y a plein de choses, plein de questions, plein de commentaires ou de réponses qui m'ont amené toutes sortes de pistes de réflexion pour mon cheminement personnel à moi. Donc, je suis certaine que ça va plant some seeds pour toi aussi et que ça va t'inspirer à go in puis continuer à avancer sur ton chemin de guérison, peu importe à quoi il ressemble en ce moment. Donc, sans plus tarder, je vous laisse pour la conversation. The conversation will be in English. Et si vous avez des questions, du feedback, n'hésitez pas à nous contacter par la suite. Bonne écoute! Welcome, Jasmine, to this awesome conversation. How are you today?
I'm doing so well, Claudia. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to seeing where this conversation will take us. I feel it's going to be very inspiring for the women who are listening to us today.
Totally. I feel grateful to be here. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. You have an amazing story, an incredible journey that got you where you are today. And I would like to know, how do you define yourself in this moment? And what brought you to this? We'll learn more about you, obviously, but this journey you're on and how you help people right now.
Oh, that's an interesting question. That wasn't in the question notes. So how would
that came up?
Beautiful. So how would I define myself right now? I would define myself as a human that is here to explore this interesting planet and this interesting 3D world. And I am here to help others remember their divinity and their sacredness and their power within.
I love that. Beautiful.
Yeah. I'm like, does that sound right? Yeah, that's
it does. That was beautiful. I guess you weren't born doing that. And even like all the way up to your 20s, I'm sure you didn't really identify yourself as this beautiful phrase that you just told us. So what brought you to this being that you are today?
Yeah. And I guess we could call it like an energy worker or a healer. There's debate about that term healer, but we can throw that out there. And I would say that my journey was a coming back to this sort of space. So energy work was very much a part of my childhood. My mother studied Reiki in the early 90s. And so she often practiced with me. And I remember going to elementary school and having tests and telling her the exact time the test was at so she could send me Reiki during it.
Wow.
So yeah, energy work has definitely been part of my foundation, and it just took me a long time to figure out that that's what I'm supposed to be doing here on Earth. So yeah, we can go through that journey of how we got there.
Yeah.
And then you can ask questions as they come up. So I guess I'll start just by saying that I was definitely very much an overachiever growing up. My parents
lifting my two hands here as well. Recovering overachiever.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of people resonate with this in the society that we live in today. And we can talk about more of that too. But I really identified and saw in hindsight how much achieving mattered to me. And my parents got divorced when I was 4 years old. And 4 years old is when our heart chakra is developing from the ages of 4 to 6. And I do want to acknowledge that word chakra is from Sanskrit origin. It is an ancient Eastern Hindu word that needs to be respected. So I just want to acknowledge that. But so when that energy center was being developed, my parents happened to get divorced, and that was an experience for me, we'll call it. And I felt a lot during that time without knowing what to do with all those feelings as a 4-year-old child, right? And so what I did learn, and I think, during this period of our lives from 0 to 7, when that program that subconscious is really developing and figuring out really at the end of the day, how to give and receive love, right? Like that is really at the end of the day, the goal of that unconscious mind is to learn how do I learn how to receive love and how can I give love? And oftentimes our environment are not conducive to unconditional love. And there are situations that happen and experiences that happen that cause us to feel loved in a way that isn't necessarily healthy, we'll say. And so for me, I learned how to really feel loved when I was achieving. And I was good at achieving. Anything I touched, any sport, any school activity, or like homework, whatever, I excelled at. And my parents would give me a lot of love for that. They would really acknowledge and honor my successes in the external world. So growing up, I always thought of this idea of like wanting to help people. Like that was from a young age. I can remember myself knowing that is what I wanted to do, was to help people. And so being my overachieving self, the way that I knew how was in science, and I was going to become a science researcher and change the world. Yeah. And so that's what we did. That's what we set out to do. We studied biotechnology and then went to Lakehead University in Thunder Bay for biomolecular science, and then got a job before I even graduated back here in Ottawa, where I live. Well, I guess I don't live there anymore, but where I'm from. And I was working in science research for a few years, and really recognized quite quickly like how much I wasn't helping people. Doing experiments. So I worked in the Ottawa Institute of Systems Biology. And like, where did I work again? Ottawa Institute of Systems Biology, and it's a lab associated with the University of Ottawa. And I worked in the biochemistry, immunology, microbiology department. And so as a research assistant, I worked with a bunch of different postdocs and PhD students. I had my toes in a bunch of different research projects. But at the end of the day, I was doing a lot of cell culture work, animal studies, and very preliminary research that would feed into a database of information with the intention of finding drugs and finding pharmaceuticals, right? And that's what most science is nowadays. It's mostly funded by big pharma or government, which, I mean, big pharma. So so I had this like, not feeling really great about being in science. Simultaneously, when I got my job in science and during university, I started working out a lot. And it was the first time I really went to a gym, first time I had a personal trainer and lifted weights. And so when I got my job in science, I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I have no long-term goal to achieve, right? And I remember deciding with the help of my coach, I'm going to do a bodybuilding competition. And so I was working in science. I was training to compete in bodybuilding, and just side by side, my coaches, I was looking to them and thinking, wow, they're really helping me. They're really making me feel good, look good. I'm learning, I'm growing. Like, this is fantastic. Like, that's how I want to help people.
Right.
So I remember I was training for my last competition in 2016, and I was in the phase where I was starting to lean out, and I was at the gym and I was doing shoulder presses, and I saw a lump in my armpit because I was getting leaner, and I was like, oh, that's weird. Like, what is that? So you feel it, you go on WebMD, you go through the internet and self-diagnose, right? And then I think, okay, well, I'll just go get it checked. And I went to my doctors. It got biopsied, MRI'd, the whole 9 yards. They didn't know what it was. So they decided, okay, we're going to take it out. But I was gearing up for provincials. So I was like, well, no, I'm going to compete in bodybuilding instead of going into surgery. So we scheduled the surgery after my competition. So I found the bump in about May 2016. My competition was August. I had the surgery in September. And then October, so I had the surgery in September. And when I had the surgery and they took the thing out of me, they realized it was a rare lymphatic disease called Castleman's disease. I actually had the same surgery when I was 2 years old.
Wow.
So it is a disease of the lymphatic system. And basically what happens is the lymph cell takes in a toxin like it's supposed to, but it doesn't know what to do with it. So it just keeps on building and building and holding on to these toxins.
Right.
Side note, sounds like a really classic empath's disease, but we'll get to that. And so I was diagnosed with that in September. And then October 2016, I quit my day job. So when I got diagnosed, it was like very much an experience of like back to body. It's like, okay, the mental goals, the mental game, the planning, the scheduling of our life doesn't really matter so much anymore. We need to get back into our bodies. And so I reached out to a local healer and worked with him extensively over the year. I think we did like 25 sessions in the year. Like, wow. It was pretty extensive. And during that time, I started to build my business in fitness. So I quit my day job without any plan. I was on 3-month contract. So in October, I signed my last contract and I was going to be done in December. And because I was already really showcasing myself on Instagram with my bodybuilding and whatever, it was very simple for me to just announce that I was now offering. And by December, I had like 20 clients, online clients. So that was awesome. Fast forward to like February, I'm only like 6 weeks working on my own and I'm doing everything virtually and I'm alone in my home working from my computer, got really lonely. So I started becoming a personal trainer and wanted that more one-on-one experience. And so I was a personal trainer alongside doing a lot of healing on my own. And working through this Castleman's disease, which I got put into remission and the doctor didn't understand how, but I didn't get into the energy healing because Western doctors, you don't go there. And so as I was healing, which is a lot of deconditioning, right? It's a lot of rewriting the programs that we learned during that time of 0 to 7,
Yeah.
And we learned how to receive and give love in a way that like really doesn't serve our heart and soul. Sometimes, not everyone has that experience. And while I was doing that and I was recognizing how I was coping with my life and what wasn't serving me and getting rid of those things, realizing I was good without them, right? I was also looking at my clients, and I got busy real fast, and seeing which ones were actually progressing in the way that they were wanting and which ones weren't. And it was very obvious to me that the ones that were progressing were also mindful of their mental health, mindful of their rest and their balance of life. And even though they weren't fully achieving that, they knew they were intending on it, right? They knew it was important. And the other category was there more to see me to cope. And what I saw was a lot of like women who would work 60 hours a week, had 3 kids, had to, go to all these different extracurricular activities with her kids, have a relationship with their husband, blah, blah, blah. And she would have zero time for herself. And then she'd come to the gym to work out for an hour. And it was almost like, it felt like this punishment. It felt like it was coming from this place of, oh, I need to look good and still keep on top of all this other stuff. And I need to have it all together. And I could feel their inner world just so tense and so scared and so full of fear. And that for me was like, fuck, I'm not helping people again. Like I'm back in the lab. And so I quit my day job again. That was a little bit more slow. I slowly let go of clients as I started picking up energy healing clients. I started offering meditation and group healings at a local meditation studio when that was still around. And yeah, I just slowly started to come back to myself is what I see it as.
Yeah.
And it was fucking scary, and it's still scary. And I'm still have days where I'm like, am I living in a fantasy world? Can I really be doing this?
Is this real life?
Yeah. So that's my spiel.
Wow. I love it. There's so many things I want to go back to. Cool. I can relate to a lot of your story, actually, knowing from a very young age that like, I'm here to help people. I started coaching for me, it was in figure skating. I was like 9 or 10. I was assistant coach, but I wanted to like share my passion for the sport, and like just seeing the little kids, some of the kids were taller than me, let's be honest, seeing them like progress. And so I can definitely relate to that, and unlearning a lot of things to come back to yourself, which is what I've personally been doing with the work and like personal development, spiritual development in the last few years. And going back to who we are when we're kids. I think that's the key to life. Just going back to who were you from 0 to 7 years old, right? Yeah. Before you got the labels of perfectionist and people pleaser and overachiever. Yeah. Before you got the conditioning from society, from your parents, the programmings, the doubts, the fears. But it takes a lot of unlearning. And like you said, it's scary as fuck. And it still is, even though we've been doing the work for so long. You mentioned something, I think I read that on one of your posts on your website, that the more you achieved, the more you felt loved.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And I guess I had to do a lot of forgiveness on myself. And I think a lot of listeners can relate to that. When we become aware of these patterns that we used to have, like, the more I achieve, the more I feel loved. And then you're unlearning that pattern. You're like, then I was kind of like hitting myself in the head. Like, why did you operate from that pattern all your life? Well, I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? Like that was the program that was installed in me.
Yeah, totally.
Did you have a lot of forgiveness to do? Forgiveness work for yourself, for your parents, for society, or you know what I mean? Before you could accept that these patterns brought you to where you were supposed to be. You had to go through the science research experience. You had to go through the bodybuilding competitions.
Right. I never felt any like animosity towards that. Like Good. I never felt like that was a waste of time or anything like that. No, I don't see it like that. And so I don't feel like I can answer your question of, did I have to go through a lot of forgiveness? I feel like forgiveness is something we all have to go through at some time or another, and at multiple layers through our journey. Right. But it wasn't so much for me of like, oh shit, I realize this now, and now I have to go and do the work. Because I recognize that would be more doing. And I was at the place where I realized that it's no longer about doing.
Yes.
And this is this is the mind fuck.
That's
right?
so hard when you're an overachiever, because we're so programmed to like do, achieve, set the target and do. So when you're not doing, you're like, oh my God, like I'm not progressing, or, I'm wasting my potential. I should be, we're shouldering all over ourselves. So I love that you're saying that.
Totally. And so what I recognized early on was that it was a practice in observing and noticing. And that was it for like a good year. And it's not just about noticing and observing, but it's observing and noticing from a place of non-judgment. Right? How can I see myself and the mistakes that I make and the crazy path that I've gone on? How can I see that and still feel love in my heart for myself?
Yeah. That's key.
Yeah.
That's key. Because,
I thought so.
Yeah. And I'm sure you saw some of your clients go through that as well. I feel like women will judge ourselves, because we'll have the awareness. And then, like I said, we'll either feel like we need to forgive ourselves because, we didn't know any better. Right. Or we'll judge what we're noticing. And I always say, like, the first step is always the awareness, like being conscious of like what you're actually doing or thinking or being, or these programmings. Yeah. But then if you judge yourself, you're not going to want to be observing yourself more, because you're going to fall back into this negative spiral going down. So what's the point of doing the work? You know what I mean?
Totally.
So
totally.
I love that you mentioned that.
Another piece that I noticed early on, and it might be useful, is I recognized energetically that masculine and feminine space, or yin and yang, if you want to call it, or anima, animus, whatever resonates with you. And so I recognize that masculine energy, the doing, the action, the protection, the provision, the structure, the strength, the logic, the reason, that's all valuable. Yeah. And that is a lot of what our world is created on, and what our program is created on, right? And that feminine energy, which is quite suppressed in a lot of us and this world, is the healing, is expression, sexuality, intuition, being, the act of simply being, vulnerability, spontaneity. Yeah. Right. So that is where our healing lies, in that realm. And it's up to our masculine energy, because we all have both, to unplug from that external world, unplug from like the structure and the action that we've been programmed to. And how can it turn its focus towards its own feminine, right? How can it hold space for its own feminine flow? Yeah. How can the logic and reason take into consideration the intuition and trust it? Trust it is key. Yeah.
I'm still learning that. Obviously, this is something I've been working on a lot in 2021, like masculine and feminine energies, and trusting my feminine has been the biggest challenge. Totally. Because all my life I've been operating in my masculine energy, so I can trust it. I've achieved amazing things when I'm in my masculine, right? So switching to operating from my divine feminine energy, I don't have a lot of physical evidence that I can still have the quote unquote success and happiness and joy and fulfillment. Right. So it's a work in progress, but that's so important.
It's definitely a work in progress. And one of the questions you had asked me was around alignment and how do you know when you're in alignment or not? And I think, working with the masculine and feminine energies is a good way to understand where you're at and have a baseline, so to speak. Yeah. But for me, what it means to be in alignment with yourself is that you're not just operating from the mind, from the ego, and ultimately from your places of fear. And, you know, it might not be obvious that you're operating from a place of fear, but when you dig down into it, you recognize, yeah. And so when we're operating from a place of our heart and our soul, if we want to be more tangible about it, it means that we can enter our work, enter our job, and still feel relaxed in our body. We can leave our job and leave work and still feel relaxed in our body, right? We're not operating from this place of, panic, I got to hustle, I got to grind. It doesn't work. Right.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to coming back into alignment with yourselves, I think looking at your feminine and masculine energies and the balance and the harmony between the two is really powerful.
Yeah. And for someone who's new to this concept of feminine and masculine, what are some tangible things that we can be when we're in our feminine? I know for me, nature helps for sure. There's different things that I do to be in my feminine. Any things that you started to implement in your life to connect with that?
Yeah. So again, it's really about using that strong masculine to focus on that feminine. So before, I would like to plan and structure a lot. I'm sure a lot of people can resonate with that.
Yeah.
And so one of my ways of surrendering more into my feminine was to have a couple of days a week where there was no scheduling and planning. It doesn't mean I'm not going to do anything, right? I still want to do things and I still want to engage in my life. And if I don't, then there's probably something going on with my self-worth that I need to look at and hold a little bit, right? So it's recognizing that you can do these small little things. And if they show up in a way that you're not expecting, right? Like if I give myself a full day off and then I feel like I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to do anything. And I just cry all day. I'm not wrong or bad for that. That's perfectly good. Right. And so that was one piece of like giving myself time and space throughout the week and not just being a robot with scheduling and planning. The other thing is really focusing when it comes to rest, really focusing on activities that were nervous system down regulating, right? A lot of us rest, but are doing things that are activating for the nervous system. It's great to go out with a girlfriend and go have dinner and have a glass of wine and you're away from work and there's an element of rest to that, but it's still very much a nervous system activating. And there's a masculine quality to that, right?
Right.
So reaching for things that have no purpose, right? Doing art for the sake of art, lying in the sun for the sake of lying in the sun, but not having an agenda having an intention of like, I want to be, but not having that high attachment to what you do in order to get there.
Or the outcome or like the goal, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that was me at the beginning. I was like, okay, every Friday afternoon, I will be spontaneous. It will be my feminine energy. And then one of my coach was like, you can't plan being spontaneous. Like, it just doesn't work.
Totally.
For me, a struggle, and I think a lot of women can relate to that, is giving myself permission. Permission to do nothing. Permission to have an intention to just be, permission to allow space, especially as an entrepreneur and like a high achiever and all that. And I feel, again, because of the kids, the house, the jobs, the social life, the relationships, there's just so much, right? In 7 days, there's just so much that we're like doing and doing and doing. Yeah. And I always like to tell my clients or just my friends and my family, I don't think all of that's in your schedule has to be done like now. Like learning to prioritize, to kind of spread out what needs, quote unquote, to be done. Yeah. That way you allow space and give you permission so that when you're in that space doing quote unquote nothing or just being, you don't feel guilty.
Totally.
Right?
And something else is coming up for me too. When you allow what you just said, right? And you make that time and space for yourself, you allow your healing. And it's as simple as that. There's been tons of times where people have come to me or my partner who is in a holistic health business. And I've even talked to our friend Barat about this, where people will come to us with needing help. And we have a conversation and it's kind of like an assessment, if you will. And a lot of the times it's like, this person just needs to clear their schedule.
Yeah.
Like literally they just have zero time for themselves. And then they're reaching for supplements or energy work or whatever it is. And it's like, no, you just need time and space. And that's such a concept for some people. And it's really recognizing that it's not their fault. It's not that individual's fault. That is societal programming.
Yeah.
That is conditioning that our parents, their parents have kind of brought forth, and we're still carrying those conditions. And I really, truly feel that we're at the point in time where our generation is saying, fuck that. We're not doing that anymore. A lot of us are doing the work, and it feels really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's exciting to feel and see the shift. And it's, again, trusting that once you clear out your schedule, once you're more in your feminine, once you're more in alignment, then you can feel the benefits from that. It's like working out. If you've never worked out in your life, it's going to suck for a few weeks, maybe even a few months. But then you're like, oh my God, I need this. I feel good in my body. It's the same with that kind of healing work journeys that we're on, It's
totally.
Yeah. I want to go back to when you had your diagnostic, with the disease and all that.
Sure.
I feel like that was probably a turning point in your life, because you said you quit your job after. I'm sure you had a lot of thinking, like, why is this happening to me? Is there something that I'm not letting go because all the toxins are being accumulated? Why do you feel that we always, not always, but we most of the time need to have the depression, the breakdown, the burnout, the injury, the lump,
rock bottom,
or something to happen that makes us, okay, stop and start being aware of like what's going on,
Yeah, totally. So again, I'm going to correct you a little bit, because I didn't have that experience. It didn't feel like rock bottom to me. It was very much of, oh, okay. And a catapult. That's what it felt to me. It felt like a catapult. It was like a wake-up call that I was able to just see quite clearly and say, okay, and surrender to it. And as I'm saying that, I'm like, I didn't give my feminine enough credit back then. She was on point.
She was awesome.
So, but I do want to touch on what you're saying, because I see that all the time. And there's often times where I see people, and as an intuitive, I can understand what might work for them in terms of how they can shift and adjust their external world in order to feel better internally. And they're not ready. And I can't force anybody to heal. And that's not my place. And that's not my purpose. And I don't want that. Yeah. One of the things that I talk to my clients about, when if they're interested in working with me, is that I am not here to heal you. I'm here to provide a space and a channel for your healing. And I remember a teacher, when I was going through some energy healing modalities, she prompted us to think, you are the faucet, not the water.
Oh, and I like that.
I love that. And I think about that almost every session, where it's like, the faucet and the water or the energy is flowing through either direction, whichever it needs to go. Right. Yeah. And so I don't know why I'm getting into this. We're coming back to the idea of hitting rock bottom. But so even though, you have help around you, there's people that are able to inspire you, you know what to do, right? We intellectually can see what we need to do and how we need to do it, but we don't do it. And then shit gets worse, and we get more stressed out, more sick, blah, blah, blah. The layers get deeper. And then we hit this rock bottom. And I really think that it's actually a beautiful place. Like, I'm cheering people on when they hit their rock bottom. Some people might think I'm a masochist when I say that, but I truly think it's a beautiful place to be, that allows you to make a profound choice. It allows you to understand that the programming that got you to that rock bottom, right? So that ego, that mind, and that fear speaking and telling you that you need to hustle and you need to do that and you need to be overworking, blah, blah, blah. You get an opportunity to see that is fucking bullshit. It's just a lie, and it's keeping you in this maze or this rat race that really is not serving you or your family or anyone around you, right? And so I really think that why people need to hit that rock bottom is because our programming is so based in our mind, in our fear, in our ego, that until that's bruised a little bit, we can't see that there's another place to be operating from. Yeah.
I love that, because you don't know what you don't know, right? So if all your life you've been living with the same routine, the same conditioning, the same thinking, the same habits, the same people, that's all you know. Yeah. Right. So then when something happens that shakes you out of this reality that you're reliving every day and every day and every day, like, oh, okay, there's other options. There's more opportunities. I can make a different decision. And it's a scary place to be in. But I always say after the breakdown comes the breakthrough. Right. And I have learned with all the work I've been doing on myself to smile when I go through this hero's journey or like the dark night of the soul, or like when I have a breakdown, I'm just like, yeah, what's coming out of it? It's going to be amazing. Yeah. While you're in it, it's painful and you can cry and you have moments and you have all the emotions and the awareness and you dig some layers, and you see some stuff about yourself that you're like, okay, I got to work on that. But I've learned to, and I think everybody has the potential to go through these moments with a smile. Like I felt like my soul was smiling, even if you're having these emotions, because, oh, cool, what's going to come out of it is a breakthrough and not the breakdown again.
So you're touching on something that's really, really important for me, where like I want any listeners that are feeling like resistance to what we're saying to really listen up here, if you will. But what I see a lot with folks is that we put our emotions into a box, right? And what I've learned is that the human experience is our emotions, right? It's our joy or our sadness or our grief or our excitement, right? That's how we really experience and interact with life is through our emotional body. But our society has told us that there is a category of emotions that are wrong and bad, and that it is up to you to not experience them, to keep them closed down. And if you can't do that, then there's probably something wrong with your mental health. And so take this drug, and so that you just numb yourself out and don't feel them, right? And so we've gotten this idea and this collective program that when we feel angry, when we feel sad, when we feel grief, whatever that dense emotion is, that there's something wrong with us, that something is maybe not wrong with us, but something is wrong, right? Things aren't right. And it's really what it is, it's shadow work and recognizing that these parts of you that are angry or sad or whatever are valid. And the more you try to avoid them and push them away, the more you are pushing yourself away, right? And dishonoring self and not showing that masculine is not showing up for that feminine, basically. And so I think it's really important to come to the place that you just spoke of knowing that it's hard to go through those breakdowns, but how important they are for the overall experience.
Yeah, because every emotion will bring you a message. Totally. Like you feel joy. Awesome. What's the message? While you're in a really joyful situation, you should be doing more of that. You could be doing more of that, or
you're connected to your heart.
Exactly.
Let's talk about some more of those messages, because I think they're important. Anger, you have had a boundary that's been crossed, right? Like
boundaries,
right? And that's valid, whether it's a physical boundary, an emotional boundary, an energetic boundary, like that's valid. Your anger is valid. You're not wrong or bad for that. What's another one? Anxiety is one that I like to talk about a lot. If you are feeling anxious, that is a message that you are ungrounded and that you are not fully in your body. And it's probably that way because there's something there that you don't want to look at. And so every time you start to get grounded and in your body, there's a sadness or there's an anger or a rage or whatever it is. So then you shoot back up into your mental space and start living from there and get anxious again, right?
Yeah, very well said.
Yeah. Emotions are energy in motion. There's a really good book called Molecules of Emotion by Candace. I forget her last name because I have a client, Candace, and I always get them mixed up. It's either Candace Pert. Yeah, Candace Pert, Dr. Candace Pert. And talks about how, like emotions are simply energy, and all energy is information. And so when we can learn to feel into the energy and what it's telling us, then we can have a better relationship with our emotional experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel as well, I was catching myself almost forcing or wanting to be in those high vibing emotions 24/7. And not because I didn't want to face the lower vibing emotions, or I was like, oh no, I'm the kind of person who never gets angry. You know what I mean? Like you would get, you would get external validation, or even your own validation. My ego would be saying, I never get angry. I don't get sad. I'm always in a good mood. I'm always positive. And then your clients label you as that. And you're like, oh, Claudia's always positive. You're like, no, like all these emotions have their reasons to be in their place, and I can listen to them, acknowledge them, and not, drink them or shop them or porn them or, you know what I mean? So I love that we're chatting about that.
Yeah, totally. Beautiful.
Yeah. And, for somebody who's listening right now is like, oh, I feel the awareness, like the seeds have been planted. I want to start going in, connecting to my body, diving in more into like the balance between the feminine and the masculine, but they've never really done anything to go through their own healing journey. What would you recommend, or like a first couple steps that we can all start taking today?
Yeah. So I would say the first thing is like, we're not forcing our healing, right? The way that you have been approaching life, that hustle and grind, there's no space for that within your healing. And so making sure that you're in that space of almost like surrender, stepping into the unknown, like making sure that you have the capacity to start that work.
Yes.
This is another important point, like energetic capacity. What we're talking about, the reprogramming, the healing work, the inner work, that takes a lot of energy, right? That is a taxing experience to go through on the system, on the nervous system, on the consciousness. And so being gentle with yourself and recognizing when and where you have the energetic capacity, right? If your agenda is stacked until 3 months from now, don't start your healing journey until 3 months from now, right? Like don't intend on going deep until you have some space for yourself. So that's my first thing. And then the second thing I'd say is just start to explore your own silence. Have you read the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle?
Yes.
So, like how her going to sit in the closet and locking the closet door and just like going
10
inwards.
minutes.
Yeah. So figuring out a time and space where you can be alone with yourself. And that's it. You're just breathing. And allow whatever comes up to come up. If you feel sad, cry. If you feel angry, punch some pillows. If you feel lonely, put your hand on your heart and breathe into your heart and be with yourself. Right. And so it's not so much about like, how can I do my healing? It's like allowing healing to come in. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes. Yeah. Allowing is key, because at the beginning stages of my healing journey, I caught myself being in the overachiever patterns, right? So I'm going to read more books. I'm going to hire more coaches. I'm going to do more time on my healing. So I was forcing the journey instead of allowing it to be and responding to life and opportunities and all that, So we have to be mindful of that too at the beginning of our journeys.
I think that right there, plus what you had said previously about like positive vibes only all the time. Yeah. I think that is where a lot of Westerners and I'm going to say just white folk can get caught up in the trend of spirituality and healing and almost like move their addiction to like that ego validation from their achievement outside and like bring it inside.
Yes.
And it's just about being careful with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like healing and spirituality are not new concepts. They're new concepts for the West.
Yeah.
And so respecting and approaching these practices with reverence, not just willy-nilly every weekend going to whoever's having a healing or a sound bath or an ecstatic dance, whatever, like really knowing who you're working with if you choose to work with someone. And yeah, like it's intense work. It's intense work.
It is. It's always worth it though.
So worth it.
So worth it. So
another couple of tips that I'd like to share is finding community. That's something that I wish someone told me earlier on.
Same.
I don't think I found community until like I started my healing journey really in like 2015, 2016. And I don't think I really found my proper community until these last couple of years.
Same. I can relate to that.
Yeah. There was people around, but it was just, I didn't realize that I got to choose who was around. Right.
Yeah. And that's hard too. And I can speak for myself, because again, you grew up with your friends and you've known people for 12, 14, 15 years. And there's always that I should still be friends with them. And what are they going to think of me if I don't really want to hang out with them anymore? And like the people pleasing and committing to like all these brunches and dinners and showers and weddings. Shedding a lot of relationships is part of the work. And it's a part that's, anyway, for me was challenging, but then that just left room for my tribe, my spiritual tribe, that I found within my mastermind. And a lot of my tribe I've had on the podcast before. And, a lot of them as well, including like Barad that we mentioned. So yeah, it's again, it's energy and motion, you release to allow more space for what's serving that next version of yourself, that healed version of yourself. And yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I have a question that just popped into mind. You can answer it or not. I don't know if you have an answer to that, but do you believe that we can truly heal in one physical life on earth?
Well, I would ask a question in response to that question is, what is your definition of being healed? What is to heal? Like, what does that look like for you? Is there an end path?
That's a good question. For me, healing like 100%, and even saying this out loud, I'm like, I'm not really sure I can really heal 100%, is to feel like completely whole and loving myself 100% and knowing my true self 100%.
Sure. And so to answer that from that perspective, I would say yes. And I would check in with any conditionings that say getting angry doesn't mean being whole. Or whether you can love yourself when you're feeling depressed, right?
Yeah.
There's somebody said something to me once that really stuck. It's not about getting rid of the parts of you that you cringe at. It's about getting rid of the part that cringes.
Yes. Oh, I just got goosebumps all over. Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's those little pockets of ourselves that we're not happy about. Often we say, oh, we need to heal those, but it's really about coming to terms and to love with those parts.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I think it's possible. I think it's a big undertaking. I think it's like, if you want to end up as like the monk in the mountains with no care in the world and feeling completely whole, then you're going to have to dedicate like a lot of your time to this. And I don't know if that's your goal. So even though my work is so grounded in this stuff, we'll say, I don't feel like I need to be healed by this end of the lifetime. Like I don't feel like I have a goal with that or an endpoint in mind. Yeah. It's recognizing that it's happening spontaneously, constantly. And I just get to respond to life and lean in where it feels good and to hold myself when it feels bad.
Yeah. I love that. Beautifully said. Thank you.
No problem.
If anybody's interested in learning more about you, perhaps working with you. I know you do some stuff virtually because most of my listeners are more in Quebec, Montreal, but how can we get in contact with you, reach out to you if we need help on our healing journeys? And
Yeah, so I'm on a break from social media right now, which you know, but I will be back eventually. So you can check out and follow my Instagram at Heal with Jazz. And then my website is the best way to get in touch with me and to check out all of my offerings. So www.healwithjazz.com, JAS. And yeah, right now I'm offering basically 3 things. So we have the Bliss Retreat, which is a 4-day all-inclusive healing retreat that includes a plant medicine ceremony with Borat. And that's happening 4 times in 2022. And then I also offer sacred ceremonies. So I serve out of my home every Friday. So we can sit in ceremony together here. Or if that feels a little too intense and you're just at the brink of your journey, energy work is a great way to start. So I offer energy work virtually or in person, and all of that can be booked on my website. And there's more info there too to learn more.
Amazing. I will put all of that in the show notes.
Great.
And I always finish these awesome conversations with the same question for all of my guests. I'm curious to hear your answer.
Okay.
What's your favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote is by Marianne Williamson. And it is, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
Yeah.
And why? Because it's true.
Yeah.
A lot of the times when we're going through that, like reprogramming or healing, we're basically getting rid of these ideas and programs that don't fully serve our power in our heart. And that's really, really hard. And that's really, really tough. And there's a lot of scary stuff that happens because the ego has been running the show and now it's not doing that. And it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. I love that. I'll keep that quote in mind because that resonated a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Thanks, Jazz, for this awesome conversation.
Thank you so much, Claudia. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. J'espère que cette conversation awesome t'a inspiré. Et d'ailleurs, I would love to hear back from you. Rejoins Karmakin sur les réseaux sociaux and tag me in a post pour partager ce que tu retiens de cet épisode. Je serais vraiment grateful aussi si tu pouvais me laisser un rating and review pour le podcast. Ça me permet d'avoir un impact positif sur plus de gens comme toi. Merci beaucoup d'avoir été à l'écoute and until next time, je te souhaite une journée awesome.